Hi everyone, Ollie here. Welcome back to the channel once again. I'm a final year medical student at the University of Warwick, and this is going to be a 10,000 subscriber Q&A. We passed that 2 or 3 weeks ago. I want to say now very rapidly approaching 11k, so that's mad. Before we jump into this, you have about 10 days left to use code OllieB33 to get a third off your order of How to Draw Anatomy by Dr. Phil Malloy. This isn't sponsored or anything. I don't get any money back if anyone buys a copy like this. It's just a really good book that I would have really appreciated as a junior medical student, and Phil has agreed to do this deal with us for viewers of my channel. So if you need an anatomy resource in your life or a gift for a medical student, then it's a great book. But today this is going to be a Q&A, and I've got all your questions on here. There were a lot submitted for this, so I am going to try and fly through them as quickly as I can. Thank you all so much for sending in the questions, and I'll try and give as best answers as I can. So I've tried to group these by the sort of question that they are. The first comment, hard work paying off, congrats dude, and that's from Kiran, another Indian doctor who is a GP trainee who has an awesome YouTube channel that you should definitely go and check out. He's done some really good and some really funny content over on TikTok. I've seen his stuff as well. Well, not that I watch TikTok, I've seen the replays of stuff on Instagram, but it looks really good. Will we ever collab? From Joe at the GradMed Journey. Joe is a colleague of mine. We're actually in the same year. Once again, she's got her own YouTube channel following her journey through medical school, and I really recommend going and checking out hers because me and her make quite different content. Are you saving up for a hair transplant or hoping for a miracle? Hoping for a miracle at this point. Where'd the Lime Converse go? From Mr. Brandon Smith. For anyone who doesn't know, and I assume that's many people, when we did our Times photo shoot, again a link to that video down below, they gave me these ridiculous kind of contrived studenty, trendy student clothes to wear, part of which were a set of bright green Lime Converses, which were maybe some of the worst shoes I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm quite grateful that those photos never saw the light of day. And then the last of these more socio-personally type of questions, have you ever been to Ireland? And if so, how did you find it? I've been to Ireland once, and it's a very strange story that I'm not going to get into now. But during my undergrad, I had a girlfriend at the time who was Irish, quite a Catholic family. And I went to Ireland one weekend, sort of just outside Belfast, to go and spend some time with her family and meet her family for the first time. Fun fact, I'm not Catholic. I'm atheist as far as it goes. Not like, you know, die-hard militant atheist, but atheist enough not to be devout Catholic, which her parents clearly expected me to be. And we had a bit of a rough weekend, and then basically we had to break up after that weekend because it was just clearly the dynamic was just not going to work. So a bit of a tumultuous visit, but obviously I don't blame that on Ireland. Did you do anything after your degree before graduation? Not really, nothing substantive, because I applied for medical school during my, well, what would have been the beginning of my third year of my undergraduate degree, so there was actually very little gap. So I finished, you know, June or whatever of 2017, and then I would have gone to medical school in September, beginning of October. So I think I just worked during the summer. I must have been working in Nisa at that time. So I was just stocking shelves, working on the till in a supermarket, trying to have some time off from academia, which I really don't regret, by the way. I don't recommend doing a summer internship or anything before medical school. Unwind, mentally prepare yourself. Is it a bad idea to only apply for one university for GEM? So this is difficult, right? On your UKCAT form, you can apply for up to 4 medical schools. Obviously, you can put in 4 choices in whatever order you like. And ideally, you would try and populate all of those 4 slots, because the more slots you can populate, the better your chances are going to be. And I guess in general, what I always advise people is you need to apply to a medical school that you are actually willing to take up a place at. Otherwise, it's a waste of an application and all the stress and stuff that goes into it. So, you know, obviously it's not ideal, but if you can only apply to one place for GEM for logistical reasons, and you would only be able to take up that place at one school, then only apply to one school. You know, that's just how it is. You're going to have to work harder probably for that one place, because every part of the process becomes higher stakes. You know, you've got to get a high UKCAT score, you've got to be competitive for that one school. But if that's the reality of it, then that's what it's going to take, and it might take you a few more cycles You know, it might take you up to 3, up to 5, whatever. How long did it take you to write your personal statement? I think I spent about 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, and that wasn't intensive writing, but I tried to start prepping it as early as possible, at least just getting the bullet points of what I was going to say for each section down, because that meant I could get feedback as I went on. If you want feedback, it's completely unreasonable to expect other people to turn around and check it in less than like a working week, and maybe even longer depending on the person. So what I would say is it's not the writing really that takes the time. The writing is easy, it's the feedback and the final shaping in response to feedback that takes time. So I'd maybe start a month, 3 to 4 weeks, I would say is probably optimal, because it lets you get feedback on a couple of drafts. And to be honest, that's all you need, I think. Things to keep in mind during freshers or first year of medical school. Some generic advice is, particularly if it's your first time going to university, and I know this was true for me, you're kind of sold this very idealistic experience. You know, university will be the best years of your life, you'll make the friends you'll keep forever, and you know, you might meet your partner and all of these things. All of these things might be true, but don't worry if it doesn't, you know, if this miraculous experience doesn't seem to happen to you in the first week or in the first few months or the first year. I know certainly when I did my undergrad at Newcastle, it took me a long time to settle in, and that's even speaking as someone, I don't usually have a problem meeting new people and making friends. I'm not very socially anxious or any of these things, but I didn't feel like I kind of settled in and belonged to any particular group for probably most of the first year of my undergrad, and that was thankfully very different with medical school because we're all in it together on the grad entry program. Everyone was my age and it was very easy to fit in. Just don't worry if your experience doesn't live up to these overhyped expectations, I would say. The next one is tips on managing time during medical school, and again, I really dislike the culture of productivity and time management excellency that kind of pervades Medstagram and Medic YouTube and all the rest of it, partially because I do not believe for 1 second that the people who push that sort of narrative actually keep to it themselves, because it's impossible. And B, your time doesn't have to be super productive, right? That shouldn't be the goal. You should be aiming to be happy. You should be having periods of productivity and, you know, making sure you're working and achieving your goals. That's really important, particularly if you're quite goal oriented like me. And the way that I do that is you have to set periods of time aside for when you're going to be working and when you're not going to be working. So you might decide that 9 to 5 is a work day, and any time within that you should be doing something productive, not taking excessive breaks on 9 to 6 or 9 to 7. Or you might say, for an hour or two every evening, my time can be dedicated to projects or extracurriculars or something. But what's really important is compartmentalizing time that is not going to be productive, because you're not going to survive if you don't do that. You're going to burn out. We're about halfway through the questions now, guys, and I am just going to put a cheeky plea out there. From my YouTube statistics, less than 10% of the people that view these videos are subscribed to the channel, but it's one of the most useful things in helping me obviously grow the channel and help bring you bigger and better content and more useful content for you guys. So I would really appreciate a like on this video and making sure that you're subscribed and hitting that bell icon to make sure that you're not missing out on any interview tips or medic vlogs when they come out. I'd really appreciate that. We'll carry on. So the next question is hardest med school year in terms of content. For me, that was definitely first year. So first year on a graduate entry medicine program is basically 2 normal years of medical school rammed together, getting you ready for the clinical part of the course. And this is a lot. And it's not difficult, as I've said before, it's like A-level biology level difficult, but it's just the sheer amount of content. My study habits were not prepared for the demands of first year graduate entry medicine. Adapting the way that I think to be more like a medic, someone who thinks like a doctor, as opposed to an academic or a scientist, which is what I was doing before, and just adapting, I think. And now that I'm used to it, things have become a lot easier, and I've actually really enjoyed medical school and not really struggled with the content. What rotation have you found the hardest? And then there's another question, best and worst GEM placements, that we'll put next to that. Best and worst for me, I have a very short attention span, right? I'm sure you can probably guess that from these videos, and environments in which I don't feel like I'm learning very much, or I don't feel the utility of me being somewhere thinking I could be doing something else more productive in this time. That's kind of the lens through which I'm going to approach this. So best for me, I think, have been, my best was definitely acute medicine last year, because I was doing a lot more independently. I was seeing patients, examining them, clerking them independently, and actually they really encouraged us to come up with a basic management plan. My specialty clinical placement in surgery at a district general hospital with a bit of an old school, quite abrasive, but very supportive consultant surgeon, someone who was very blunt and was very capable of saying, what you're doing is garbage, you need to be better, and this is how you're going to be better. I don't mind that approach. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's what works for me, I think, is someone who can just tell me when I'm not good enough and give me, you know, your shit, this is what you need to do, and don't come back until you can do it. I quite like that approach, but not everyone does. So I learned loads on that block because the expectations were high, and I really thrived with the challenge of trying to meet those expectations. Worst for me doesn't reflect very well necessarily, but psychiatry was probably the block. Not because I'm not interested in psychiatry, it is really interesting, but the placement just didn't have a lot of patient exposure, and the pace was very, very slow. And again, I had a respiratory medicine placement. That was a bit more because I really find respiratory medicine incredibly boring. Again, not that it's not important, it is very important, it's good medicine. Because I don't find it very interesting, it means I have to work a lot harder to take in the content. So I guess on the top end, acute medicine, surgery, quite high pace stuff. On the lower end, it tends to be slower pace stuff with less patient exposure for me. The negative points about Warwick, oh, that's really hard. Obviously, this is just my own perspective, so take everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but the teaching experiences at the different trusts are incredibly variable, I would say, and if you're placed at one trust for one block, you might have a really terrible time, but for that same block placed somewhere else, you might have a really good time. Honestly, we should expect that to a point because that's how the NHS is. I just feel like communication can be somewhat lacking between the university, the medical school, and then the different trusts that you can be sent to. There seem to be the same comms problems that exist within the NHS. And what I would say, again, this goes for most graduate entry medicine courses, just be prepared, particularly as you get towards the end, to teach yourself medicine. You're guaranteed little in terms of receiving the teaching that you would kind of expect you need to be of final standard, but I gather that that's the same for graduate entry medicine across the board. That's not really a Warwick problem, but that's, I suppose, if I was going to talk about one issue, it would be that. Has studying medicine made you happy? I'm sure it's made me unhappy on a great deal of occasions. The thing with it is, right, is that studying medicine is the only way to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. So whether or not studying medicine makes me happy is kind of irrelevant. I don't really think about that a lot of the time. Is it arduous and is it a grind? Yes, it is both of those things. So I can't wait to not be in medical school anymore. But have I had, broadly speaking, a very good time? Yes, I'm immensely grateful to be where I am. I've had some excellent opportunities. I don't regret it in any way. If that's the question, you know, does it make me happy? Yes, sometimes. Does it make me unhappy? Yes, sometimes. Do I regret it, and would I do it all again tomorrow? Yes, I absolutely would, and I recommend the same for anyone else. What specialties are you considering at the moment? I'm sure many of you know by now that I am aspiring to be a neurosurgeon, someone who operates on the brain and the spinal cord. Within that, I have particular interests in neurotrauma and pediatric neurosurgery. Those are the two areas of it that I find really interesting. If I was going to do medicine, and for whatever reason I couldn't do surgery and I had to pick a medical specialty, again, I quite like pediatrics Again, I really enjoyed my peds placement, and I like the challenges that come from working with kids. A slightly different environment than the rest of medicine. The doctors are all super nice in peds, which they're not necessarily elsewhere. You get a mix, whereas in peds, most people seem to be really nice. So I think I'd be very satisfied and happy working as a pediatrician. And acute medicine or emergency medicine, they're slightly different things, but they're really, really exciting. They would keep me entertained, for want of a better word. They'd keep me stimulated intellectually. Those are the kinds of specialties that I'm thinking about slowly. What direction for the channel once you graduate? That's a really good question. It's going to be more of the same. I think obviously it needs to focus then on what life as a doctor, assuming I pass finals and all the rest of it, is like. It's going to be a lot more junior doctor focused. I haven't decided whether or not I want to sink to the realms of like, doctor reacts to this or whatever. I find reaction videos incredibly painful to watch. I don't know, might be more content to investigate, a lot more collaborations I hope to do. I do want to do a lot of AFP, SJT, med ed content, a lot more med ed content that I want to do from the platform of being a doctor as opposed to a medical student. And I know that's kind of a shallow view. I think try and up the ante of the things that I'm trying to do and make content that is more widely appealing, perhaps, but that's something to keep an eye on. And again, if you guys have any suggestions as to the sort of content you'd like to see, assuming I graduate and everything, that's something I'd be really interested in. So we shall see. There's a lot of thinking to do. 3 words to describe your journey. Oh God, that's really hard. Stimulating, tiring, gratifying. I think those are my 3 words. How has your medical school adapted to COVID? It's drastically reduced patient exposure, which, as far as medical education goes, is a disaster. But there's not really any other way around that. They've got to keep to their own guidelines. They've given us the safety net of, because everyone's patient exposure has dropped, you can't be kicked off the course this year if you fail your exams, which is an amazing safety net to have. There's not an awful lot to say, to be honest, because they've done the same things that hospital trusts everywhere have done. I actually think that their communications have been very good, and I think the staff have done an admirable job. It cannot be easy trying to negotiate something like this, especially when the government changes its mind every 5 minutes. So, you know, actually hats off Warwick and the team and all the trusts. I think for what it's worth, you've done a sterling job. Your opinion on physician associates? Oh my God. Preparing to put my foot in my mouth. All of the physician associates that I've ever met, and that's not that many, but all of the ones that I've ever spoken to or met in person have been fantastic. I've never had any personal problems with a physician associate. From what I gather, they are exceptionally hardworking, exceptionally knowledgeable, and a really valuable addition to any medical team that they're in. They are a really good asset for the teams that they're in. They know their stuff, they're helpful to the teams that they're in, and I think the evidence suggests that as well. All of the literature that I've read on the introduction of PAs suggests that teams do very well. It raises a lot of questions for me, particularly if we start to think about things like PAs being able to prescribe and order ionizing radiation. Do I think that those changes, if they happen for PAs, are a good thing? I mean, it just makes them more useful to their team. So yes, of course, I think those things are a good thing. The problem is how is that training going to be provided? Is it going to be an extra course that they do, you know, a prescribing course on top of their studies, which has to be done once they graduate or something? I don't know. I think the question that most people have is the PA course basically the same as a medical course condensed into 2 years? And I think the answer to that has to be no. There is no way on earth that can be done. And if it could be done, then you would have no need for medical school, right? Like, at all. And there is a reason why I think the EU insists that medical school courses have to be as long as they are, which is usually 5 years. And once again, at the risk of very much putting my foot in my mouth and offending people, which it absolutely isn't meant to, My central questions just simply rely on what do PA courses not include in order to bring the length of the course down to 2 years. I suppose I'm basically just stuck between, I obviously want PAs to be able to do more. I don't think that's a bad thing. And do I think they should be able to take postgraduate exams to specialise and to, you know, climb the career ladder in the same way that doctors do? Yes, I think that would be a good thing. However, on the other hand, if they can do that, what recognition is there going to be of the limited knowledge base compared to the medical training system? I don't know. I really don't know. And I think that's the question that a lot of doctors have, is that what is the missing element? What is being missed out? I realise that asking these questions could make me very unpopular among the PA community. I'm absolutely willing to have a sit down with a PA and have these questions answered or speak to someone about it. It's more from a position of I don't know, rather than I have any contempt for PAs or the introduction of the PAs, because I don't. I think they're a great addition. What do you think of studying medicine in Eastern Europe? I really don't know. I do know that the people that do it seem to come out obviously with a very comparable degree of knowledge to people who study in the UK. Again, I can't really speak for any content differential. The only valuable contributions that I can make is that I have two insights. The first is that a lot of the courses that particularly recruit UK students to European medical schools are predatory in nature. That's just the way a lot of these things are, and that makes me worried. That's not to say that the quality is any less, because I don't know, but I get worried anytime I see that kind of angle, like, hey, you didn't get into a UK medical school, but how about you come and do this in this medical school that you've never heard of in another country? I'm not saying that the quality is any worse than UK medical schools. I'm just saying that that by itself raises red flags with me. That's maybe unfair, but it does. All I'm wary of is people going and doing a degree in the European Union or in a European country, and then finding it difficult or impossible to come and move back into the UK medical system, which I assume that most people from the UK would want to do. So the short answer is I don't know, and I think the only bit of advice I can give is be careful, do your research, speak to people that are already doing those courses, and try and get some good guidance before you apply. Is it normal to think, I wish I'd done a PhD or research during grad med? Ooh, that's really hard. Do I wish I'd done a PhD during my medical degree? No. And that's even as someone who wants to do a PhD later on, but I'd rather do it in whatever field I've committed to. So if I'm, doing neurosurgery, I'd like to do a PhD in something neurosurgical or in medical education. If I did pediatric surgery, I'd like it to be in that. I'm not ready academically to do a PhD, and I would want to contribute to my field. So at least for me, no. It might be the right thing to do for many people, and there are obviously those MB, PhD programs run at some universities, and if you get onto one, great, they're super competitive, make the most of it. But I think that's a really personal choice. To do any sort of substantive research, I found really, really difficult. If you can get onto, collaborative research projects or projects that already exist and you can contribute in some way, then great. If you can get a couple of publications out to help your UKFPO, although that's not going to help in the foreseeable future, and I need to make a video on that. I would say if it happens, it happens. And if you're thinking about something like the AFP, or you want to do an academic clinical fellowship or something later on, then the stakes are higher, and you probably need to chase that stuff and get in touch with people locally. Ask people who you know who've done research how to get involved, and that's a whole topic of its own. But let's not kid ourselves, like grad entry medicine is really hard, and surviving year to year is hard enough. So if it doesn't happen, don't worry, you've got loads of time before specialty selection to think about doing research and publishing papers and all the rest of it. If it does happen, great. Make the most of your projects, try and get involved with high yield things and get your outcomes, get your presentations, get your publications, get your prizes. And then lastly, advice for work experience during COVID. Virtually impossible, because it's not a good thing for anyone at the moment to have superfluous people around. The online courses, I'll link a couple in the description, things like Brighton Sussex Medical School. I know they've done one. I know a few other places have. Try and get that virtual work experience. Volunteer in your local care homes. and nursing homes and things, and care facilities for people with disabilities and things like that, those places really need your help at the moment. They need care staff, particularly at a time when they're hemorrhaging. Hospitals, which I know that's the place where most people want to be, those places don't really need extra people around at the moment, especially if they can't contribute clinically. But those more local solutions where staff are much more thin on the ground really do need your help. So I would try and get that sort of more domestic, local experience, because that is as valuable, if not more valuable, when it comes to applying to medical school. That is going to help you develop the skills that you actually need. Standing and watching a day of surgeries is great, but it's not going to make you a better medical applicant, and it's not going to make you a better doctor. But developing those personal empathy, communication skills, those things are, and I would really encourage you to try and develop them. And that, guys, finally is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit that like button for me, leave a comment, subscribe, and don't forget to go and check out ollieburton.com for more free videos, interview tips, and discussions just like this. There are 3 ways you can help support the channel, guys. The first is by hitting subscribe and leaving a like and a comment. The second is by buying me a coffee using the Ko-Fi link in the video description, which will help keep me awake during the editing process. And the third is using my referral link in the description below to save 10% off your first year's subscription to Complete Anatomy 2021, my favourite anatomy learning tool. Take care, and I'll see you next time.